Hello everybody, David Abram here. Welcome back to my channel as always. It's been a really long time since I've pushed out any MGTOW content, but I'm back after a long ride of errands. And to roll into this MGTOW discussion, I wanted to talk about the status quo and what the status quo represents on the grand scheme of things in relation to MGTOW. Now, from my perspective as a MGTOW, the way I would define a status quo is a set or established hierarchy which citizens of society or citizens of a civilization abide by to maintain a certain social order or a preferred social order. So in other words, there is a status quo for how one comes to a job interview. If it's a white collar, usually I would think you come with a dress shirt, a tie, a pair of ironed dress pants, and some shiny black dress shoes or something along those lines. Maybe perhaps, and I don't know if that's the best example, but I think you get what I'm going to write at in this video. And I wanted to talk about this in concerns to the gender dynamics of the society which we live in, and as it pertains to the red pill man. Now, to start off with status quos from my perspective is a social construct that doesn't exist outside of a government and doesn't exist outside of a civilization, human civilization being that is. So whenever we hear as MGTOWs anything about a status quo, I think we all recognize, and if we don't, I think it's important to recognize that status quos are put into place, especially for men, in order to keep men bound to the plantation. And a good example of this is marriage. If you think about it, technically marriage is considered to be a certain status quo. It's a societal expectation that's pushed on a civilization's citizens, or pushed on a civilization's occupants, especially men, because men being that they are the providers and the builders of society, and marriage, traditionally speaking, was designed to ensure the stability of the family unit, and men being the provider of the family unit and women bearing the children. But as MGTOWs, we recognize that this status quo doesn't represent the best interest of men when the game is systematically rigged against us in the court systems, the justice systems, the double standards, and there's many, many, many other examples I could go off of. But nonetheless, status quos are only put into place to maintain order, or to maintain a certain preferred order. And when you go against that status quo, or you stand in opposition to the status quo, or you just start making up your own little thing and going your own separate way, this is when you're always going to be subjected to hostile criticisms from the outside world and the society in which you live in. And truth be told, this is why MGTOW always gets attacked, or is subject to criticism from the outside world, and gets attacked by the blue pill man, or the man who is still in the falsified matrix as we know it. It's not that MGTOW is wrong, or that MGTOW is something of immorality, or something that is this sadistic, patriarchal supremacist, cult or anything like that, because we all know MGTOW is not a movement. It's really not anything like the MRAs in the sense of having political strings attached. MGTOW is just a way of life and an ideology. And it's an ideology that's, frankly speaking, not very popular for the status quo, because there are no status quos that value, at least not in today's essence, there really aren't any status quos that put a strong emphasis on the value of men. Men are only valued not for who they are, but under the status quos, such as income, what car you drive, where you live, who you're married to, this, that, and the third. Men are not valued for who they are as individuals. Men are valued for their utility. They're valued for the things they can do. They're valued for what they can provide. And they're valued for what they can produce. And as MGTOWs who have taken the red pill, or as red pill men who have unplugged from the falsified matrix, we recognize this. Status quos don't ensure the best interest of men. In fact, they never really did represent the best interest of men. However, they did ensure that men were measured by their utilities and their value and asset. Because truth be told, that's all men are seen as. It's almost like I was watching this hangout, or in the process of watching this hangout, and the funny thing is I'm watching this hangout as I make the video, but in the hangout, a few of the fellas there mentioned that essentially all we really are the turkey basters or the sperm donors, and they are the golden uterus, which bears the children. And so this is why, truth be told, women are valued more than men in the sense that they will be the one bearing the children and ultimately raising the children. So you could have 100 men in a room and only one woman. The woman, in that essence, would have more value than even those 100 men, despite the ratio of 1 to 100, because she will ultimately be the one to carry the offspring and to ultimately bear the offspring and give birth to that offspring. So her value, which is the golden uterus, is placed over that of the turkey baster or the penis. And this is one of the founding principles of gynocentrism. And this is why marriage, ensuring the stability and security of the family unit, and also the security of the woman and future provisions for the women, is gynocentric. This is one of the founding principles of gynocentrism itself, which runs rampant through our society as we know it today. So, to any fellow MGTOWs out there watching this, I'm pretty sure veteran MGTOWs have an idea as to what I'm talking about. But to any newcomers to MGTOW, or any youngsters like myself just starting off to take the red pill, I think it's very important for us to recognize that the status quo is only enforced, especially on men, more than it is women, because men are the builders of society, and without men to maintain, produce, provide, and etc., society would essentially fundamentally collapse. And they know that. So that's why everywhere you look in the media, they'll always usually show a man who has a love interest. If you look at sitcoms, or if you look at a lot of the movies, depending on what genre of movies you look at, they'll usually always throw in a love interest, because love interest and marriage and, providing for a woman is one of the building blocks of society as we know it. That's a status quo. Now, if we walk away from this, then essentially everything goes on a decline. And that's what's happening gradually as MGTOW continues to grow and grow and grow. Men are waking up. They're saying, no, I don't want to do this. Fuck the status quo. And ultimately they begin, or are beginning in the process of walking away from it. Walking away from a rigged game that doesn't value them, truth be told, and or doesn't value them anything other than being a utility or a cash dispenser. And ultimately they go their own way. But if any other MGTOW or any others have any resonating thoughts on this, please do feel free to leave them in the comment sections below. If you agree, hit the like button. If you disagree, please do feel free to elaborate below. I like to get conversations going, especially since I'm just coming back. But nonetheless, for all my fellow MGTOW brothers, continue to go your own way. Stay strong, manpower, and until the next time, thanks for watching. One more thing to make note of that I think is rather important to notice about some of these status quos. Maybe not necessarily all of them, but certainly a lot of them. Such as what car you drive, where you live, how much money you make, who you associate with, what connections do you have, this, that, and the third. Notice how a lot of these status quos, truth be told, were created by women themselves. And the reason so is so they could measure to see who more likely would become the best provider, or possibly become the best provider for them. And this is why women have that built-in evolutionary hypergamy. And this is why. they size up their men through the status quos so they can pete out the ones who are the supposable losers, and then all they're left with are maybe the top 10% who own that Lamborghini or the Mercedes or the mansion or whatever else their status quos will dictate for that particular society. But I think that's of acute importance to notice, in case any other MGTOWs or newcomers haven't. But I'll leave everybody with that thought, and cheers.